You're such a genuine gem. Thank you for clicking on my video. I'm Brooke McKenna, and today's case is about a missing woman who is also pregnant. This is the Akia Eggleston case, and this is a woman whose only worry should have been what kind of clothes she was going to buy for her baby and what the nursery would look like, but instead she would vanish with an unborn child, leaving another behind. Only one suspect truly comes to mind for everyone close to this case, but if it's that obvious, why hasn't this case been solved? Has everyone been looking in the wrong direction this whole time, or is this possibly a killer on the loose? Akia deserves way better, and I hope you give me the chance to tell you her story. If you don't know, it is my absolute passion to tell these stories, and I mean no harm or disrespect when I do so. So if it is something you would like to support me in doing, all you have to do is make sure you are subscribed with the post notification bell on, giving this video a thumbs up, and leaving a nice comment down below. I also want to thank today's sponsor, which is Ana Luisa, a sustainable jewelry company that has the most elegant pieces I have ever seen, and they actually hand make them in a studio in New York. And now you guys know that I'm very particular about my jewelry. If you guys like the same style as me, then you are going to be in love, because I swear it is the most adorable little pieces I have ever seen. These are a few of the pieces that I got. I haven't taken them off since I got them. They are seriously the perfect balance between like a delicate look and having strength to them to actually be able to handle everyday wear. They're just so nicely made. I know a lot of you guys like to ask where I get my necklaces from when I wear them in videos, and I would love to tell you, but the problem is I thrift most of my jewelry. But one of the best things about Ana Luisa was the fact that their company keeps a small stock of each item. And so there's not a ton of pieces that are going to go out in the world, you know, like a mass production where everybody walking down the street is going to have this same pair of earrings. Very unlikely you'd ever run into anyone with the same piece as you. So it's basically like thrifting. And Ana Luisa actually decided to give you guys 10% off with the code McKenna10, or if you go to analuisa.com/McKenna. So thank you for sponsoring this portion of the video. Now let's get back to the story. So it was 2017 in Maryland, and Akia Eggleston actually was living in Cherry Hill, Baltimore with her 2-year-old daughter. Now, she was born on September 6th, 1994. This is Akia, not her daughter. We're talking about her mother, and she was said to be a tiny little thing with the fiercest personality, and that was from when she was little and all the way up into her adult years. That's just how she was. You looked at her and you were like, oh, she's so small and cute, and then, you know, she stood up for what she wanted and she spoke up and she wasn't afraid to do so, and you're like, wow, you know, that much power came out of such a tiny girl. And that's the instant feeling you got from her. But it was never a bad thing. She was always such a nice person. She was actually so sweet and willing to help anyone and give them whatever they needed, whatever she had. Because the thing was, she never had much. It wasn't like she had an abundance to give, but she didn't care because she was still going to help other people. Akia loved to give herself makeovers. She was really into beauty and modeling, and she also really loved to dance, and it's a way she actually expressed herself a lot of the times. And she was a natural born caregiver, and this kind of, you know, was due to the fact that she was an older sibling, and that can do that to you. You just have that natural, you know, second parent ability. You know, not second parent, but like you're second to your parents, and you kind of just watch over the siblings. And so she loved kids. She loved taking care of them and being around them. And she was raised by her mother and her stepfather, because she had not ever really even known her biological father. But as soon as she met Sean, her stepfather, she was still really young, and she actually ran up to him and gave him a hug and accepted him into the family. And, you know, that was how it was from the very beginning. So they had such a good relationship, and she grew up in a great household and to be a wonderful human, regardless of, you know, who she was with or who they were to her. She could be with a complete stranger and she would still show that kindness that she had within her. And it was, you know, without fail every time. Her heart just shined through so brightly in everything she did. When she was 17 though, her mother would pass away from breast cancer, and Akia took this so hard because her mother was her best friend. They got along so incredibly well, and so after this she kind of decided to not share a lot with the world, and so she didn't post all about her life on social media. She really kept her really personal things to herself, so a lot of people didn't know a lot about her or what she was doing in her years going into adulthood, because she was just living rather than, documenting it for other people. She didn't really drink or do drugs or party because at 22 years old, she was a mother, and she had been since she was 20. And then she was also pregnant with another baby, so she was far more focused on her children than anything else, and she was such a good mom too. With her daughter, she constantly was goofing around with her. They were inseparable. They literally were never apart if they could help it. They would dance together. They would do makeovers. Literally, Akia let her do anything that she was doing, of course, that was acceptable and that was safe for her daughter, but she just wanted to have her be involved. And her children actually had 2 different fathers, but she was a single mother at this point. And by May of 2017, she was actually 8 months pregnant, and she was ready to pop at any moment, literally any moment. The doctors kind of had her on standby. She was also supposed to be taking it very easy. She was put on bed rest and told not to be walking long distances or driving, and to not really move at all because she was at such high risk for pregnancy, because her baby was breech, meaning that it was flipped over the opposite of what it should be, so the head wasn't coming first, the feet were. So she would need to do a C-section. Akia wasn't necessarily scared of this because her firstborn, her daughter, had a C-section as well. That same thing happened, and so when the doctors told her to kind of rest and relax, she tried to do so. She stayed in as much as she could, and she just kind of laid around. She wasn't working during this time, all of this, but she was still going out to see her friends and having fun, just, on a lesser scale because she was so exhausted. However, on May 3rd, she would leave the house on one of these outings, and this was just supposed to be a short trip. However, she would never return, and the thing was, she had roommates, she had people living with her, but nobody really noticed for a few days. And no one would see her for 5 days. No one would hear from her, and this wasn't necessarily unusual. She was pregnant, she was sleeping all the time, she wasn't going many other places, so it's not like her family and friends expected to see her out and about or see her at their homes, and they didn't go to see her because they were going to have a baby shower for her on May 7th, 5 days after she left the house. And so they were all excited and ready to see her and kind of planning that, which was funny because Akia actually decided to plan most of it herself. She put the $900 deposit down, and she was planning everything because she was so excited that she was having another baby, especially a boy, because she had a girl and she was going to have a boy, so she was so excited. So everyone was planning to meet her the 7th, and nobody thought that they should be checking in on her before then. So on that day, everyone prepared themselves to see her, to celebrate the baby, and they went to this location. And everyone would arrive to see that Akia still hadn't gotten there when it was about her. So they started calling her and calling her. They were getting voicemail. Finally, her grandmother texted her and said, "Is your phone off?" just to see if she would respond. And she said, "No. Why?" And her grandmother said, "Well, why aren't you answering any of our calls?" And she would then say that she couldn't talk and she would call her later. Well, they waited, and she never came to her own baby shower. Now it is believed that that text her grandmother got was not sent by Akia, but at that moment they had no idea, and they were so confused because Akia had put all this together herself, and now she wasn't even going to show up. That just didn't make any sense unless, of course, she was sick or, not feeling very well being pregnant, but that's not what she said over the phone. Of course, they all began to talk to one another about, when's the last time you saw her? How was she doing then? And everybody was saying, I haven't talked to her in quite a while. and that is when they officially would report her as missing. And they also decided to go to her apartment to search for some clues to see if she was there, to talk to her and to make sure she was okay. And they were met by a complete surprise when not only was she not there, but most of her belongings weren't either. There was only a bed and like a dresser, but nothing else. Her clothes were gone. All, little trinkets that you set about and a mess that you keep, there was nothing there. The only thing that they did see was that there was a hole about fist size in the wall. Now the family began to search for her all over the community, in as many, places and parks and just anywhere she could have possibly gone. Maybe she had gone on a walk and been hurt, and so they just wanted to make sure she wasn't just about in the area before they began to worry too much, because they were already having heightened anxiety, of course. But that is when investigators got involved, and they traced her footsteps to when she originally left home that May 3rd. And that was when they found her on surveillance footage at a local bank. This was at the 600th block of Cherry Crest Road, which was 3 miles from her apartment, which probably would have been too far. Definitely would have been too far that the doctors would say she could have walked, but she probably wouldn't have walked that far by herself anyway. But she was there wearing a green shirt, a black jacket with gray sleeves, black and white yoga pants, and black sneakers. Akia would take out $572, an enormous amount for her to just be doing on a random day, and she left the bank and vanished. The bank tellers were talked to that saw her that day and said that they were certain that Akia was showing no signs of distress, mental or physical, when she withdrew the money. She just was simply there to get her money and leave, and everything was completely normal. But this is when the family started handing out missing persons posters. These of course said that she was African American with black hair and brown eyes, with her ears pierced and a cherry tattoo on her left shoulder blade. She also had the word Emory tattooed on her upper left arm. She was also 4'8" to 4'11", so she was really short, like I was saying, weighing 130 to 145 pounds, of course, pregnant. Now, a reward much larger than the Baltimore missing persons cases normally got was offered by the FBI for $25,000 to ask for information in this case, because the thing was, it wasn't just one girl missing. There were two humans that now had vanished. Her and her unborn son. This is when the family would learn some things that they were not aware of, and they believed that Akia was not dating the father of her unborn son and was not planning on doing so. In fact, she hadn't even told them his name, and she refused to, so they figured he was just someone completely out of the picture she didn't want to deal with, and that was okay with them. They weren't judging her. However, her friends, her best friend, would say that Akia was actually trying to move in with her unborn son's father. And that's why there was barely anything in her apartment, because she was in the process of moving. Her family didn't know if they could believe this though, because if she was moving at that moment, she was 8 months pregnant, could not have been packing and lifting boxes and moving herself. So, who was helping her if she did? After she vanished though, they found out who this man was, and to their surprise, they knew him, because he was actually a childhood friend of her stepfather's, and he was a friend of one of her friends as well. So they were very tight, all in this circle. They all knew each other, and yet they hadn't known that he was the father of her unborn son. Now, his name was actually Andre Michael Robinson, and he was quite a bit older than her, almost double her age, I believe, but the paternity test was never done. So there's only speculation that Andre is actually her father, but they can't, of course, prove that. But because they didn't know who the father was, they also didn't really get to talk to Akia about the baby's name. They began to say that Akia and baby Eggleston were both missing. And that's when another friend who was much older than Akia came forward to say she actually saw her the day she was thought to disappear, on that May 3rd. She said that she was the driver that took Akia to the bank. And she said that she knew Akia couldn't drive or walk long distances. She also didn't have her own car. So this friend willingly went and picked her up. That's when this friend would fill everybody in on why she believed Akia was withdrawing that money, and so much of it. She said that Akia needed this money to basically get a deposit on a new apartment that she was going to get with her baby's father. This friend said that she took her back home after going to this bank and everything was fine, but that's the last time she saw her. But the main question everybody had at this point was, okay, if there's moving involved, who in the world was helping her? Because there's no way she had that much progress by herself. She really wasn't supposed to, and she would have abided by those certain things to keep her baby safe, because that's just the type of mother she was. So if she didn't do it by herself, who did? That's when her friends and family would all be talked to, and they said, we didn't help. Every single one of them was saying, no, I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't help her. And this just continued to be said over and over. They didn't know. Akia was also said to have a roommate who was a female that lived with her, and she often let lots of people, her friends and stuff, stay with her every once in a while, and none of these people saw her move out either, even though they could have been there at some points, but they said that they didn't see a thing, and they were actually questioned by police as well, of course, because they lived so close to where she vanished. But I'm sure you are all wondering, did the baby's father get questioned? Well, this was a bit hard to do because they were having trouble getting in contact with him. He didn't come to the baby shower that day like he was supposed to, because he was supposed to bring the food. He didn't come, and he hadn't come to any of the searches after he found out that Akia was missing. He literally just vanished. This man, Andre, was said to have another girlfriend at the time who was pregnant with his child, and he had many other children with different women. There was about 9 of them, I think, that he had with different women. And since the day of her disappearance, Akia had not posted on her social media at all, and neither had Andre. This was something that they both did regularly before that. Now, on Akia's social media, one of the last posts she put said, "I really wish my mother was here." Now, Andre also quit his job during this time as well that he had and went on to somewhere else without notice. It was so strange to friends and family because, like I said, they all knew him. He knew them, they knew him. And for him to just not even want to help with, even if, say, he wasn't the child's father, even if he just knew everybody around Akia and possibly knew her, you'd think that, as a friend, you'd at least say, is there anything I can do to help, or show up one time, but he didn't do anything. It seemed like it was on purpose to the family. But was the friend that drove Akia to the bank even telling the truth? Was there even the money going to this apartment, or was that a complete fabrication? Well, that is when one of Akia's other friends would come forward with evidence. And this was actually a message that she had gotten from Akia on May 3rd. And this was saying that she was trying to move out of her apartment by May 10th. And she was moving in with her baby's father. Since they had already been living together and everything was going well, they were going to take that next step. She had texted this to her best friend, and this basically confirmed what this other woman was saying. But at the same time her friends were saying all of this, her family was saying she never mentioned anything to us. She didn't ask us for help in moving, and she wouldn't just up and leave her place for a man. And the problem was nobody knew what the truth was between this. And of course they couldn't ask Akia. So at this point they were looking at the apartment building to see if they had any surveillance cameras to see who was with Akia that day at her apartment, or if she was there. Just, it would have added so much to the story. However, when they asked, they were told the cameras weren't working at the time. So this was a dead end. And the search continued, and actually her photo was put into all hospitals saying that she was a missing person, and if she came in to give birth to her son, that they needed to be alerted immediately. And so they knew that her due date was coming soon, and if she was going to give birth at a hospital, it would ding no matter where she was. This was also around the time where a vigil was held at her apartment, and just to, spread hope, basically, that she would come home and everything would be okay. And that is when the first break in this case would occur. This was 3 months after she disappeared, because this vigil outside of her apartment building would find a clue behind a bush. This was actually a bank card. And when investigators were called to get this, and they arrived a day later, they found that it was Akia's bank card, which she would have needed to be at this bank. So she obviously did make it home. Was this something she just dropped as she went inside, or was dragged out? Or was this something that was planted to make it seem like she made it home that day? And also, when the police and family searched her apartment and home the first time, and, all through the time she was missing, why did nobody see this bank card? By this point, it had been quite a bit past her due date, and no hospitals had seen her come in to give birth. And Andre was then questioned over and over and over again in this case, but there was no evidence to hold him, and he had to be released. After a while, it almost appeared as though he had vanished just like Akia did, because he would just fall off the face of the earth and pop up every once in a while with his girlfriend, who he had had at the time, that was now his fiance, that had his baby. And, many people believed that he was responsible, and that possibly his girlfriend at the time and his fiance then had something to do with it, because there were rumors that Andre's girlfriend and Akia had gotten into several arguments over Andre, and just kind of, bickered and went at it, because they were both having his baby at the same time. And I mean, I'm sure no matter what, that was going to cause some tension. That is, of course, if the baby was his. Over 100 suspects have been questioned in this case, including roommates, friends, family, you name it, and nobody has been arrested. Investigators decided to move Akia's case from missing persons to homicide without informing the family at all, and they found out this, and they were of course disturbed, because that meant investigators believed that she was deceased, and they had to come to terms with that. And part of their hope dwindled hearing that maybe they should be looking more for a body than for Akia and her son. They are still searching today. Akia's family actually has done interviews and talked to as many people as they can to spread this story. In fact, they went on the Vanish podcast, and you can just tell that they are so heartbroken. And it stems a lot from the fact that they believe that they have done a lot of the work on this case alone. And they have often had to badger investigators to get updates. And, they say that they're very open. They know that investigators have to work on other cases, but to have to badger them to even talk to them about the case is frustrating, and they just want help. Although investigators say that they are doing their best, and that they do see that it's foul play, and that they will continue working on it until they find an answer. Now, the only person that was kind of, a witness to any of this, the last person to see Akia and have her go to the bank with her, that witness, her friend, actually died shortly after of chronic illness, and of course could no longer be questioned, and so they lost one of their biggest witnesses, the last person to see her. Now, the media rarely spoke on Akia's case when this happened. This happened in 2017. The media should have picked up on this case and should have shared her story, because it is so important in these cases, especially in those 24 hours. Some people have tried the theory of maybe she just went away to start a new life with just one kid instead of two. She wanted to get rid of the rest of her responsibilities, or, there's so many things that people try to justify where she went. However, her family will always stand by the fact that she would have never left her daughter. Not in a million years would she have run away without her daughter as well. If that was the case, which they still don't think she would have ran away, she would have taken her. And they also say she couldn't really physically run away even if she wanted to, because she was so slow and so tired, and it would have taken a lot for her to get up the strength to run away so far that nobody could ever find her again. Some people say because she was pregnant, maybe she was distraught over it and didn't want another kid, but the thing was, she was so happy about this baby boy and she loved kids. And I'm telling you, through everything that I researched, there is no way she wouldn't have been ecstatic over that baby. She planned her own baby shower. She also had a name that she had picked out for him, which was a secret to everyone else. Unfortunately, we do not know that name, or the public doesn't. Maybe the family does, but we're not aware of it. But there could have been hormones happening inside of her because, pregnancy does put your body through a lot, and mentally you can change. Her mental health could have been compromised, but nobody who had seen her throughout her pregnancy saw any sort of changes within her. And she was still the kind person who helped so many, and she actually was letting people stay in her home at the time because she was paying for it. So they could stay without having to pay if they needed some help, and she would literally pay for everything, and these people would just, come and stay whenever they needed to. And her kindness never changed throughout all of this, and her happy-go-lucky self didn't either. It was said, though, that some of her friends kind of took advantage of her because she did have this money, and they knew that because she had actually gotten an inheritance of around $20,000 when her mother passed away, and she told her friends, of course, because she was the type to share things like that. She didn't care about money that much, and she was willing to share it with people, and I think that a lot of people did take that for granted and took whatever they could from her. Now, this does make me wonder, did one of them think that she wasn't giving them enough, or maybe she stood up to one of them and they weren't happy about it? I don't know. That's the thing. There's so many questions, and we're just going to get into more as we continue. Now, on the oxygen episode of this case, which I will always, have all the links below, but that had an officer in it, and his number one theory was that her disappearance had something to do with the back doors of her apartment. There were also dumpsters outside in that area and a parking lot where you immediately could leave from. And this was how they believed, or this officer at least believed, that, she got all this stuff out of her apartment. But it wasn't just her, because we've discussed that just wouldn't have been possible. So the one question they still have too is who was helping her. Did one of the neighbors that was right next to her see her struggling and offer to come over and help? Was it with the baby's dad that she was moving in with? And what happened during that move that caused her to disappear? There's also the theory that someone random came and abducted her from the parking lot and just took her straight to the car and drove off. Where the officer said another theory that maybe the furniture she was missing actually was thrown into the dumpster, and so was her body, and then the dumpster was taken away as usual, and that's why no evidence could be found. The strangest thing really is that no one wanted to come forward and say they helped her move. They were asking this over and over. That was the one piece that just didn't fit. If she was moving, she couldn't have done it alone. There needed to be someone else. Why couldn't someone just say it was them? Did this point to someone feeling guilty? Now, this year there was actually a bit of an update because a reporter named Claudia Rivero came across information from a source of hers, and this is on her website, which I'll have linked below. And this is someone who said that they were friends with Andre at the time this happened, the baby's dad, allegedly, and they also didn't want to give their name as a source. But this source said he hadn't talked to Andre since Akia disappeared, but had talked to police about him just to give them, an idea of who he was, if he would have done this. And he said as much as he wants Akia to be found because he has a daughter himself, that he just doesn't believe that Andre would have done this, that he wasn't the type of person to harm someone. And, he said Andre definitely should have been more involved in the searches, and I don't know why he wasn't, but he said, I really don't think he could have done this. This source has also talked to the family and told them the same thing. It makes you wonder, is everyone looking in the wrong direction this entire time, and that's why it hasn't been solved? Or did this friend of Andre's just not see him at his darkest? Today, there's around a dozen suspects that they're looking at, but like I said, no one's been arrested. There hasn't been anyone named. Neither Akia nor her baby have been found, and her baby would be around 3 at this time. And there is a Facebook page that her family uses to talk about her and, you know, just to remember her. And on the 3rd anniversary of her disappearance, they actually went to the apartment that she was living in at the time of her disappearance. They put a missing persons poster up, as well as flowers and ribbon. And her stepfather, Sean, still continues to fight for her. And he says that there's a lot of rumors and speculation and stories about that day, but they still don't know what the truth really is. They still are not 100% sure that the money that she withdrew was for an apartment that she was putting the deposit down on. No one can confirm that at all. He even went on The View to speak up for Akia, and he really did talk to them about the fact that he didn't believe the investigators were being helpful. And, you know, to remind everybody that it wasn't just Akia. It was Akia and her son. And Sean also has this theory that it could possibly have been an abduction, not for Akia, but for her baby. She was taken for the purpose of her baby. We've all heard of cases like this before that are so horrific that women or families can be so distraught because they either can't conceive or don't have a family, and that's something they so desperately want, or they lose a child of their own, and they end up doing awful things for a family, including taking another person's. Now, she was super close to her due date. Her due date was in June. She was taken in May, so they knew that she would have been giving birth soon enough. Maybe it really had nothing to do with her move at all. Maybe she was going about her own business. She was having other people help her that nobody really knew about, and that they didn't want to get involved, and so that's why they didn't come forward, which they definitely should if they're watching this, but maybe they didn't want to get involved for all these years, and it was just someone random that came to abduct her after just seeing her out. Or maybe she hired some people to help her move, and maybe that's what the money was for, to pay them to help her move, and maybe instead they ended up taking her too. Maybe an accident happened and they decided to cover it up instead of just coming forward with it. There's just so many theories, and I hate even bringing up theories because we don't know, and I feel like that's almost like false hope to the family. But I also feel like to make sense of any of this, to get answers, we have to think about all of the different possibilities, and hopefully one day we're right. Something else her family theorized was that her disappearance had something to do with a hole in her wall. You know, most of the time this points to, you know, violence or anger that somebody has that they took out on the wall instead of figuring out how to cope with that or to handle it themselves. And it was said Akia was never like this no matter what, and she would have never done this. So it had to have been somebody else. Yes, it could have been done during the move, maybe something bumped into the wall, but the other possibility is much scarier, that somebody was so angry that they punched a hole in the wall. Did they also do this to Akia? Domestic abuse is something that unfortunately happens too often, and family and friends don't know about it until it's too late because it's so scary to speak up about, especially if it was the father to her unborn son. She may have felt stuck if it was that way. I think no matter what happened to Akia, we can all say with certainty that she went down fighting for her baby. It breaks my heart to know that both of them could have been taken from this earth, and we don't know why. Now, in a lot of interviews, investigators really aren't telling much. They say that it's still an ongoing investigation, so they can't. However, like I said, the family really isn't getting updates either. They kind of have to beg them for it. And they said actually at one point they went to the department and they wanted to talk to people face to face, and that was when some of the officers didn't even know who Akia was or what had happened to her. Now, I hate that this is literally all of the information that I have found in this case. I dug deep and I tried to find the most that I could. I couldn't find any more information, even after 3 years of her being missing. And Akia's story deserves to be told all over the world, and I think that the lack of information is causing this to be talked about less, because when it's not a good story for the media, they're not going to talk about it. And because investigators don't seem to be telling anybody very much, you're kind of at a standstill. And that's why I wanted to bring you her case, because it still deserves to be talked about. And something that we all are very aware of is that the media does not like to color people of color's cases. And that includes Black individuals. And I think that their silence is very known when it comes to Black victims. And I've always tried to be very diverse on this channel, and I will continue to try to do better, because we can all do better. And even though it's much harder because the media doesn't cover it, and the media is, online resources where I find my information, but I'm going to do better at trying to talk about them and to find all the information I can, maybe compiling a few to talk about just so they are heard, because that's something that needs to change. And I think that, YouTubers are the path to that. If the original media won't do it, we can't. This is something we need to demand a change for. And I think, you guys can definitely keep all of us YouTubers accountable for making sure that we're having the most diverse stories, as long as you're very kind about it, because I think we all do this with the purest intentions. So always be very kind, but maybe just a reminder every once in a while, like, hey, haven't seen a Black victim's case in a while. Can you please share their story or something, kind of like that, just to make sure that we are, we are making sure that everybody gets justice, or trying to help. There just has to be more to this case than Akia just moving out and disappearing. I mean, her daughter is now 5 and being taken care of by family members. She asks every day where her mom is, and they don't know what to tell her. She has to go the rest of her life with questions. And instead, we need to be giving her answers. So if you have any of those answers, please do not fear speaking up. You can always do it anonymously, and you will feel so much better. I guarantee it. I know that there's a part of you that has always felt like you should talk about what you saw or what you did. And I know that you'll feel better when you do. And you can do it anonymously. You can send in an anonymous tip, and you can call the Baltimore Police Department at 443-984-7382. Or you can contact the Black and Missing Foundation, where you can actually submit an anonymous tip through there to make sure that this case is looked into further and is top priority. Sean really wants everybody to remember that 2 people went missing that day. A mother who would have done anything for her 2 children, and a baby who didn't ever get to live their life. I think that we really need to spread this case. It's been 3 years, and it's time for justice. It's time for answers. It's time that her family finally gets to rest, to know what happened, to grieve that, and to be able to not be fighting 24/7. So thank you for listening to Akia and baby Eggleston's case, and I do hope that this one gets solved. There just has to be something that we're missing, that can be found, and that can open up everything. And I really hope that that comes true soon. But don't ever forget to speak up. Your voice is powerful enough, and I love you to absolute pieces. Okay? Bye.